A boy named Ray lived in a poor neighborhood in the city. He was an unemotional person who once gained the ability to see colors inaccessible to other eyes. Like most children from the neighborhood, the young man spent most of his day on the street, socializing with other teenagers. One day, two friends were sitting among a pile of scrap metal when strange sounds caught their attention. The guys told each other that it was a golem, and it was already here. One of the young men offered the creature a flashlight in exchange for food. A golem appeared in Sector 50 of the poor neighborhoods quite recently, and none of the residents knew where it came from or who its owner was. For the poor, it was important that in exchange for scrap metal, he gave them food. The giant carefully evaluated what the teenagers offered him. It seems that today the golem was not interested in the children's offer. It turned around and walked away. The guy who offered the flashlight shouted, wanting to know where the giant had gone, which probably doesn't always work. One of the young men was sitting a little further away on a pile of scrap metal, watching the other two. The one who offered the flashlight looked furious. He wanted the golem to return, and his friend tried to calm him down so as not to cause trouble. The young man heard tiles, as if some monsters similar to this giant were killing people right on the street. The next moment, the mysterious hooded man jumped out of his hiding place. He landed on the ground a few steps away from the danger. The stranger took hold of the strap of the bag hanging on his shoulder. It turned out that inside was a pile of scrap metal, a broken flashlight, screws, and an old radio. The golem's eyes glowed with red fire, as if it were scanning the contents of the young man's bag. A little later, the creature stretched out its giant hand to the boy and took the offered metal with 2 fingers. The golem raised his hand and poured the entire contents of the bag into his mouth. The guys, whose attempt to exchange scrap for food had failed, looked stunned. They had already seen a young man who, not for the first time, had managed to earn a lot of food from such an exchange. The hungry children thought it didn't make sense, how he managed to get so much food every time. What the boy received might be enough for 3 days, but a more determined young man told his friend that he had an idea. He called the stranger the Ghost of 17th Street. Meanwhile, the guy with the groceries had reached 17th Street, Sector 50th. His steps were confident. He was returning home ignoring everything around him. Although the hungry teenagers were afraid of the lucky stranger, they decided to try to implement their own plan. The Ghost of 17th Street continued on his way. Only at first glance it seemed that he did not notice anything. The young man managed to count his pursuers, 7 guys. The next moment he stopped and advised them not to hide anymore, asking how long they were going to follow him. One of the teenagers, apparently the leader of the pack, said that Ray had excellent perception because they were trying to be careful when chasing him. The sleek young man had an interesting appearance. His nose was covered with a band-aid, and his smile had lost 1 tooth in a street fight, and his right hand was shining with brass knuckles. Ray called the leader Ron and reminded him that he had warned him last time. His eyes shone like blue stars in the darkness, and the young man remembered how he had promised the fat bandit that if he showed up again, he would make sure he couldn't walk anymore. Ron shouted back, "Did he really think he could get away with it like last time? Let him just put his bag on the ground. If Ray complies with the request, he will be able to go home unharmed." The leader smiled, hoping for the enemy's good sense. But the young man said that Ron was lying. They would not let him go. Local kids have a saying that a ghost lives on 17th Street. The white ghost walks with an inaudible gait. It does not feel any emotions. It is better not to look a ghost in the eye, otherwise all the lies will come out. This legend did not amuse the leader Ron at all. He only clenched his fists tighter. He could no longer contain his own rage, and calling Ray a selfish bastard, he attacked. The leader promised to make sure that the young man would never say anything like this saying again. Throwing the bag to the ground, the hero managed to dodge the blow of an angry Ron. The bandit was not expecting anything like this, so he lost his balance and flew forward. Ray did not let the bastard fall to the ground. He grabbed him by the collar of the light. He swung out and hit Ron in the chest, a turn of events the street gang leader could not have imagined. He did not restrain his emotions and screamed loudly in pain. The 6 subordinates of the leader shouted his name, but did not dare to intervene in the fight. They saw Ron fall to the ground with his heavy carcass. The other gang members were furious, ready to attack Ray at any moment. One of the guys ordered the rest of the group to attack the young man. He wanted to destroy him. Without further ado, the angry bandits ran forward, waving their sticks. The first of the attackers jumped up high and attacked Ray with a shout of death. But the hero easily avoided the blow, and the next moment he attacked the enemy himself, elbowing him in the face. The next moment he fell to the ground, spitting up red liquid, a scene that amazed his gangmates. Ray decided not to wait for the next attack and attacked the other pursuers himself. Everything around him turned red, but this did not affect the hero's condition. Not a single emotion appeared on his face. When all the bandits were lying motionless on the ground, the young man turned to the leader and said that no matter how many people he took, nothing would change. Ron roared fiercely, calling the Shire a fucking monster. He did not expect that one person could overcome 7. Only now did he realize that he was left face to face with an incredibly strong opponent. And at that moment, the street gang leader was really scared. As the hero slowly approached the frightened enemy, he reminded Ron that he had already warned him. Before the attack, the leader heard Ray promise that if he didn't keep up, he would never be able to walk again. He hid the knife behind his back, watching in horror as the ghost of 17th Street approached him. The next moment, overcoming his fear, he jumped to his feet and held his weapon out in front of him, warning Ray to stay away. The young man calmly looked at the knife. He realized that the gang leader posed no threat to him because the forces were too unequal. The hero saw his own reflection on the dagger's blade and thought that Ron was right to call it a monster. At an inopportune moment, Ray plunged into his own memories, wondering if this had really happened to him when he was 10 years old. It was at that time that he realized that he was different from other people. When he, then a little boy, injured his knee, he did not cry at all. And this surprised his friends, who asked him if he was not in pain at all. The other children wanted to see his emotions so they could communicate, but little Ray did not understand how to demonstrate them. He did not cry in pain and did not get angry when his friend was attacked by other children. Even when one of his friends named Bello died, the hero did not shed a single tear while the other boys mourned the death of their friend. The children were surprised by the lack of emotion in the 10-year-old boy, and they decided that something was wrong with him. He scared them. It was at that moment that he was left all alone, the lonely ghost of 17th Street. Ray realized that he would never be able to feel what people call emotions. The lonely child had a lot of thoughts on this topic in his head, and he thought he was wrong. He thought he wanted to be like everyone else and have friends. The hero did not know if he would ever be able to feel what other people call emotions. 6 years have passed and he still feels nothing, although he has learned to read the emotions of others. Ray told Ron that knives are not allowed in fights here. The boy asked the bandit if he had brought the dagger with him on purpose for use, but the man replied that he had picked up the weapon recently in a dumpster. The hero immediately realized that the fat leader was lying. He saw a black spot blurring on the attacker's chest. Ray could see a world that is inaccessible to ordinary people. Everyone has a small cup inside them, and when someone feels a certain emotion, it is filled with a certain color of mana. The traces of anger, of hate, and love have red energy. Mockery and despair fill the cup with blue mana. Joy, happiness, and elation are yellow. There are many other colors that fill the world around us. Ron, with black mana in his heart, warned that if the flight made even a single step, he would stab it with his dagger. The deep black energy on the guy's chest attracted the hero's attention. It was a strong horror. And the closer Ray got to Ron, the scarier he became. He backed up until his back hit the wall and there was nowhere to run. Drops of sweat appeared on the gang leader's face, and he seemed to become smaller. But the hero knew no pity. He wanted to teach this bandit a lesson. Ray said that such a liar deserves to be punished. Having finished with his attackers, the hero continued his journey home. The gloomy urban landscape around him was painfully familiar. A little while later, Ray finally reached his destination and pulled back the curtain and entered the room. In the room, a gang of hungry children was waiting for him. One of them was named Pale. He was the leader of the dungeon children. The hero was like an older brother to them, and the kids were laughing and hugging their favorite Ray. When the children calmed down, everyone sat down on the floor, and it was time to see what they had managed to do today. The dim light of the lamp made it possible to see small coins, chewing gum, a piece of bread, and a few sweets that had migrated from the children's pockets to the floor, their loot for the day. Despite this trifle, Pale tried to figure out how to divide it into 7 equal parts. Ray silently removed the strap of the bag from his shoulder. He hadn't yet had time to get his own loot. The next moment, the kids saw a pile of food and they shouted, calling the hero cool. They immediately realized that the young man had gotten the food from the golem, and the boys also tried to do the same, but they failed. Ray was the only one who could do it because a golem only takes magical items that have mana left over, and if a person doesn't see this energy, they won't find the right garbage. Pale drew the attention of the others by saying that it was time to share the food, and thanks to their older friend, they would not have to go hungry today. They started with a younger one named Josephine, a boy who was very happy to receive food. He was quite hungry. Ray did not participate in the distribution. He silently left the room. The young man, mature beyond his years, thought that they always did not have enough for everyone. The hero was looking at the raging stream of dark water and deciding whether to go to the warehouse. When he saw his own face in the water, he remembered that he owed these children his own life, and now it was his duty to help them in everything. A year ago, the children of the dungeon found him almost unconscious. Ray lay on the ground covered in snow. 6 friends gathered around the stranger. Together, they pulled the barely alive hero out of the snowdrift, who did not mind dying. The rescuers realized that the young man had regained consciousness, and when he opened his eyes, he saw frightened children in front of him. They were happy that the guy was feeling better, which means he will recover. When Ray returned from his memories, he thought that he had to repay all his debts, even if it was a simple favor or revenge. Suddenly, the hero heard someone calling his name. It was Pale, the leader of the dungeon children, who believed that Ray should definitely get his share. The hero refused, saying that he was fine and not hungry. Suddenly, the young man's stomach rumbled treacherously, and his friend said with a smile that Ray's stomach disagreed with him. Pale offered to divide the piece of bread equally. The guy was determined and wasn't going to take no for an answer. The friends ate and watched a strange natural phenomenon, a black rainstorm. Rumor has it that rain turns black when wizards have used too much magic. Almost all of them live in sectors with smaller numbers. Pale believed that the golem was sent by wizards, while Ray disagreed, saying that it could be an ordinary robot. But my friend strongly objected. He spoke very confidently. The leader of the dungeon children said a little dreamily, this golem was definitely moving with magic. The young man looked up at the sky, his large eyes glowing with golden fire. In fact, Ray agreed with Pale. As the golem moves, it attracts mana from the environment to its core. The different energies passing into the golem are mixed and released as black gas. Ray couldn't shake the thought that the black drain and the black gas were connected by something. But now the hero had important things to do. He got to his feet and told Pale that he would be out for a while. His friend looked worried about why he would go somewhere in such a heavy black rain. The young man did not answer, only advised to watch the level of the river. It would be dangerous if it overflowed its banks. And the next moment he rushed away, and Pale could not stop him. When the leader of the dungeon children was left alone, he grabbed his head. He was not overcome by the feeling of danger that threatens Ray. He always does what he thinks is right. Meanwhile, the hero quickly reached the corner of 2 blocks, now standing at the intersection of 17th and 18th Streets. In the young man's head, he heard that in the black rain everyone hides for fear of getting into trouble. People believe that one drop of such rain can make them sick. Ray was not one of those who believed in all kinds of superstitions. In addition, it is able to protect itself from rain, so it becomes easier to work. A little later, the hero reached his destination, a grocery store for the lame Hector on 18th Street. There, behind the fence, during a black rainstorm, 3 local workers were playing cards. Ray calculated everything correctly. The guards always gamble on rainy days. He found a hole in the fence and easily entered the warehouse. Without any obstacles, the hero reached the building and began to dismantle the brick wall. Ray could not see everything around him. It was too dark. The young man saw many different types of mana in the air, and he attracted only certain types and then mixed them using the right formula. This art requires certain efforts. It exhausts the hero. Ray held out his open palm, on which mana began to dance, forming a ball. After mixing the energy, fire appeared on the young man's hand. Although he doesn't know such methods, practicing over and over again, Ray was able to learn how to use them, and he managed to notice that red mana is harder to control than other colors. The hero thought it might be related to his sense of emotion, but he didn't know if he could create a fire that was bigger. The young man was so absorbed in his own thoughts that he did not feel the danger, and at that very moment a dagger flew at him. By some miracle, the blade of the weapon did not cause Ray any significant damage, only slightly scratched the edge of his ear. The knife stuck into the wall behind the guy, and his presence in the warehouse was exposed. The hero heard the guards shouting, saying that the rat had finally shown up. It was faster than they thought. And Ray had a thought that someone had been hiding in this warehouse before him. The guards continued to search for the person who was illegally staying at the facility. They were wearing special glasses to see well in the dark. The guy realized that 3 people were trying to hunt him down, and they knew exactly where he was hiding. He could not have imagined that the security guards at this warehouse could have such equipment as night vision goggles. All 3 prepared to throw their knives at their prey again. The next moment, 3 sharp blades flew toward the dark figure hiding behind the boxes. Ray's eyes opened wide, and he looked directly at the weapon that was rapidly approaching him. The hero quickly realized what to do and ran out of his hiding place. Moving along a zigzag trajectory, he deflected each of the flying daggers. One of the guards screamed in fright. It seems he was already familiar with Ray's capabilities. His partner shouted that he needed to aim better, but the man realized that it was useless. Something was wrong with this guy. The security guard did not have time to defend himself and received a heavy blow to the neck. The man fell on the boxes of food and lost consciousness. The other 2 could not understand how the guy could see them in complete darkness. Ray's usually blue eyes turned bright yellow at that moment. The guards' chests were glowing with orange mana, which meant rage and surprise at the same time. One of the men swung his kinjal again, hoping to hit the villain. The guard's rage did not allow him to think clearly. Ray skillfully used his talent, and in his short life he managed to gain enough experience in using his gift. By observing the flow of mana from the heart and through the arteries of the body, the hero was able to predict the next move of his opponent. He pushed off the ground and found himself in the air and kicked the guard. The blow was so strong that the man lost his balance and began to fall on his back. The last guard of the three, who was still unharmed, thought it was simply impossible. He was so confused that he didn't have time to react and saw Ray in front of him at the last moment before the impact. Due to the young man's incredible speed, the attack was so strong that the man bent in half and fell to the ground, flying through the air. These three adults, despite their equipment, had no chance against a talented teenager with a special gift. Just when Ray thought the fight was over, another guard appeared in the room. He exclaimed that he had come to check what was going on because he heard a noise. The hero knew this man. He was a singer in Hector's band named Gampri. This man with a scar on his face immediately realized who had neutralized the three brothers. It turns out that he has already had to deal with Ray and the consequences of his actions. Humphrey's eyes burned with red, fierce fire. He called the boy a little rat. The hero thought that this guard was really as scary as they said. The young man decided not to tempt fate today and to get out of Hector's warehouse as soon as possible. As Gumption was blocking the exit, Ray accelerated and punched him in the stomach. But the boy's strength was obviously not enough against the burly man. The guard shouted, letting the nasty rat avoid his attack. Humphrey took a step forward, trying to grab Ray. This giant was too fast and agile for its size. This time, the hero also managed to avoid being hit and bounced back. Gumption appreciated the guy's speed and realized that he was not an ordinary opponent. Ray thought that they were at completely different levels of ownership of their own bodies. Gumpry made another attempt to attack the boy. He quickly rushed forward and brought his right hand to strike. The hero also managed to assess the enemy's capabilities. He assumed that it would be difficult to overcome this thug alone. Although perhaps the guard's rage will play into Ray's hands, the young man realized that he needed to quickly come up with a fight strategy. The hero decided to aim at the enemy's open pain points. Ray immediately decided to take action and punched Humphrey in the stomach. Before the blow, the young man managed to concentrate fire mana in his hand. That's why his attack was unusual. He didn't just hit his opponent with his fist, but gave him an energy punch. The man immediately grabbed his chest with his hand, and it seemed to him that a fire was burning inside. Ray took advantage of this moment to escape, at which point other guards arrived, and the chief among them ordered his subordinates to search the area and find the offender. At that moment, the hero was hiding away from the buildings, and the thought flashed through his mind that he would be found. Suddenly, he saw something behind him that caught his attention. He threw a stone towards the entrance, and the guards heard the sound and ran there. At that moment, we had to sign up, otherwise we might not have a chance to get out. Ray understood this well and was not going to waste a single minute. The hero ran away. He thought that he had searched the warehouse of Hector's famous group and put himself in terrible danger. If they find him, they will definitely kill him, but he is not afraid of death. The only thing that scares Ray is that the children of the dungeon won't last long without him. Even without feeling emotions, the hero managed to get very attached to these kids and felt responsible for them. He has to save his own life because if he is killed, he will not repay the debt. Suddenly, the young man heard one of the guards shouting behind him. His location had been revealed. Ray looked around, trying to quickly assess the situation. Why the hell he was so unlucky today? The hero ran away. He could hear the stomping feet of his pursuers behind him. Turning a corner, the young man saw that there was a wall ahead of him, and he was driven into a dead end. The guards could hardly catch their breath. The guy was very fast, and finally their efforts were crowned with success. One of the men shouted, demanding that the young man come over and return the stolen goods before a dagger hole formed in his stomach. The hero looked around cautiously, but he did not see Humphrey among his pursuers. This was the only good news in recent times, because he can definitely beat these two. The young man's fist glowed with red mana, and the guards were already running straight for him. Ray managed to dodge the dagger and intercepted the man's hand. The first enemy was quickly finished with the knife, which fell from his hand to the ground. The chi concentrated in the hero's hand multiplied his strength. The second guard could not understand how an ordinary teenager could be so strong. At this point, Ray pointed his second hand with yellow mana directly at the enemy's face. An ordinary person could not withstand such an attack. The man instantly lost consciousness and fell to the ground, smoke rising from his face. As soon as the hero had finished with these two, he heard the voices of the other guards, and he thought that there was no end in sight, and he couldn't use magic consistently. But this place still deserved attention, and the young man felt some kind of attraction to this warehouse. He hid in a garbage can, and just then the guards ran past. In his hiding place, Ray realized that the footsteps of his pursuers were fading away. The young man breathed a sigh of relief, but he was not found. He decided to stay among the garbage until morning, because if he was chased to the bridge, the children would be in danger. The hero closed his eyes and was already falling asleep, wondering when the rain would end. The next morning could not please with good weather. Everything was gloomy and gray. The hero opened his eyes and immediately saw a strip of morning sky and realized that he had fallen asleep. Ray jumped out of his hiding place, thinking the danger was over. It was at that moment that he heard a man's voice saying that he had found the fugitive. The young man did not expect this turn of events, but he bravely faced the danger. Right in front of him was a man, one of the guards, who was hiding a knife behind his back. He smiled and said how good it was that he had decided to come back. Ray realized by the color of the mana in the stranger's chest that he was incredibly angry, and the hero himself had not yet fully recovered from the night's adventures. The man smiled when he saw the knife in the boy's hand. He said that it would be a fight between real men, and that they would not have to hold back. With his hand raised to strike, the guard attacked Ray in a jump. But thanks to the teenager's agility, he managed to avoid being wounded. This infuriated the guard, and he began to swing the knife even more actively. For a moment, the hero lost his balance, and it could have cost him his life. The bastard was already sure of his victory. Ray almost fell and dropped the knife, and now he had nothing to defend himself with. The guard's knife came close to the hero's eye. But he didn't hurt the boy, although there were splashes of blood on Ray's face. It was the red liquid of the enemy, whom he did not destroy. The hero managed to survive, which means the day started well. A man with a gun in his hand saved the boys' lives. It seems that they knew each other, because the rescuer told the young man that it was dangerous and called his name. Putting away his weapon, the guy put a cigarette in his mouth and took a lighter from his pocket. He asked Ray with a smile what he had been up to this morning, and it was the boss of 17th Street, Niels. He told the hero that it was very dangerous. Instead of answering, Ray asked if someone had called Niels, because usually at this time he was still asleep. The boss of 17th Street replied that he had heard that Hector's guys were looking for someone. Suddenly, the man saw the boy trying to hide the cans, and Niels asked if this was what he had stolen from Hector. He thought the hero was crazy. How could he put himself in danger for scrap metal? Ray thought that people like the 17th Street boss were difficult to deal with. They are quite rare. Their emotions are so slow that the cup is never completely filled. Niels said that doing so could get you killed. Some people shouldn't be touched. And Ray stubbornly replied that if he didn't do it, they would starve to death. The boss replied that it didn't matter. He had now repaid the debt for his previous rescue, and the hero replied that he had only pulled the man out of the river because he had confused him with a bag of supplies. Niels was not upset by this word at all because thanks to Ray, he is still alive. The hero replied to the owner of 17th Street that he had already paid for that incident before. A year ago, a young man accidentally pulled Niels out of the waters of the Black River. He was a member of Sector 46 who was betrayed. It is unlikely that he lied when he told us about it. It was this man who gave Ray fist-fighting lessons as a repayment for his rescue, which were very useful for the teenager. Now the hero decided to ask Niels about what was bothering him. Ray was interested in joining an organization. The hero wanted to join the one headed by the boss of 17th Street. He believed that only then would the children of the dungeon be safe. Judging by Niels's reaction, he was not expecting such a conversation at all. The man seemed confused. He turned around and walked away. Turning the corner of the building, he smoked again, trying to collect his thoughts. Niels's next question stunned Ray. As it turns out, he knew that the young man could use magic. The boy's reaction confirmed his thoughts, so he was right and not crazy. The man had seen this boy make a fire without matches or a lighter. Ray asked the 17th Street boss to tell him everything he knew about magic. Niels replied that he had little information, only a few things he had asked the sorcerer from his previous organization about. Air mana is used for magic. Very few people can recognize and control this energy. Ray asked if the magician had said anything about colors. Niels replied that he hadn't heard anything about colors. The man said that mana was impossible to see, and the hero was stunned, because he was the one who was walking in that case. Ray seriously asked if that was really all. Maybe the boss had forgotten something. The man made a sharp blow. It seems he did not intend to hit the boy, only to scare him. But the teenager did not look scared. The young man wanted to know what answer Niels would give to his question. The 17th Street boss refused Ray's request to join the organization. The man decided to explain that all the sectors are located on the banks of the Elton River, and if you move upstream, you can reach other sectors. Niels believed that Ray could leave the poor neighborhoods and find a better life for himself, and it would be a big mistake to let a child with such abilities die here. The man asked if the boy had ever thought of leaving Sector 50, and he was ready to help him find a car. But the young man replied that he was taking care of the children of the dungeon, so he could not leave this place. The boss smiled and asked me not to worry about it, because he was going to set up a kind of shelter. It seems that Niels is serious about looking after the little vagrants. Ray was looking at the man's chest. The colors of his mana were neutral. It was hard to tell if he was telling the truth, but he was probably not lying. The young man decided to warn his boss, having visited Hector's warehouse, and found that he was preparing for war. He saw trucks full of weapons arrive there. Niels replied that he had his finger on the pulse, so he knew about it. The use of firearms in any conflict means a direct declaration of war. Ray said that if Niels loses this war, people in the stores will suffer. He thought that the amounts to defend his organization were more significant. The boss replied that it seems so only because there are many people worse than him. Stop treating him like an old man, he's not even married. And Ray replied seriously that he was indeed old. These words of the boy's angered Niels, and he tried to hit the boy again, but he managed to jump away. At that moment, a car pulled up next to them, and the driver told his boss that they had to go. As they were getting into the car, the man warned Ray that it would soon be a real battlefield, so if possible, they should find another shelter. Then, without warning the teenager, Niels threw something at him, and the boy managed to catch it. Opening his palm, he saw a glass ampoule with a green cross. The man smiled and advised the boy to treat his injured ear. The next moment, the car drove away, leaving Ray alone with his thoughts. The hero was frozen in place, with no plan in his head for what to do next. The young man decided to go to his native 17th Street, near the central square. There he saw one of his cavemen sitting next to an elderly beggar. The boy was very happy to see Ray alive and well, because last night he did not return home. They were worried. The boy asked his friend why he looked so shabby. Tears came to the boy's eyes, and he wondered if Ray had been fighting with someone, and the hero hurried to reassure the child, saying that everything was fine. He had just fallen. Josephine wiped away his tears. He was really worried about his hero. He saw the boy's incredible colors of mana. Only he can feel so many emotions at the same time. Ray gave the kid some canned food and told him to go to their tent and tell Pale that he would be there soon. The boy did not argue and immediately ran home. When they were alone, Ray asked old Viola if she had told Josephine anything. The woman replied that she was telling the child about the rainbow. The young man asked not to tell the children about it, because if the blind storyteller continued to tell them about different fantasies, the children would not get used to street life. Viola asked who would continue to carry the fantasies if not the children. Ray looked at the old woman. His eyes changed color. He tried to guess her emotions. He did not see purple mana in anyone but Viola. The hero warned the blind storyteller that a war might soon break out here and that she should change the street. The woman thought Ray was very kind. She heard him leave. The next morning, Ray was knocking on the door of a local establishment, fulfilling a delivery order. The man who opened the door was very surprised to see the guy. He said that Ron had warned him. Now he would be delivering. The hero thought that the bandit would not be here anytime soon. Both his legs were broken. The hero asked the shop owner if he was going to evacuate because there would be no customers when the war started, and the man replied that he had nowhere to go. He also hoped that the war might not happen, and Ray asked what he meant. The man pointed to the closed door and explained that Hector and Niels were talking there, and if the two agreed, there would be no war. The next moment, the door opened abruptly, and the store owner was eagerly awaiting the outcome of the negotiations. The first to leave the room were 18th Street boss Hector and two of his henchmen. The man carefully examined the store's premises, and he had a large scar on his face. Ray wore a hood over his blonde hair to avoid attracting attention, but Hector noticed him anyway and asked why the child was working in a place where all the adults had run away. He came over and smugly put his hand on the hero's shoulder, wishing him to try hard, because that's the only way to survive in this world. Hector threw a few silver coins into Ray's palm and advised him to treat himself to something. The hero didn't say a word, because he realized that the forces were unequal now, and that Gumption might recognize him. As he was leaving the room, the man with the scythe looked at the hooded child. The band-aid on the hero's ear did not escape his gaze. Humphrey looked around sharply, keeping his eyes on Ray. The guy adjusted his hood. He guessed the man recognized him. Hector's henchman looked at the hooded teenager closely, but still said nothing. As he was getting into the car, the boss asked Humphrey what he was doing, and the man replied that he was leaving. The shopkeeper breathed a sigh of relief when Hector's car drove away. The hero realized that Humphrey remembered the wound on his ear, but why he left and said nothing. The store owner called Niels. He wanted to know the results of these negotiations as soon as possible. He and Ray went into the office where the 17th Street boss was sitting. Niels, with a cigarette in his mouth, sadly replied that the negotiations had failed. Unfortunately, he could not do anything. The war was going on. The shop owner was stunned by the news, and he was hoping that the war would be avoided. Niels replied that he could not accept such stupid conditions, such as a takeover of their organization. It was really the worst thing that could happen. The owner said that it was not his fault. It seems that he will not be able to open his store for a long time, and the boss advised Ray not to leave his hideout anytime soon. A little later, the hero left the store, and on the way home, he thought that if the war broke out, he would lose the opportunity to walk around the city. His next thought was that before the war started, we should find as much food as possible. When the hero reached the street corner, a black car blocked his way. The glass on the driver's door slowly lowered as Gumption sat at the wheel. Ray couldn't see it yet, but he thought that he hadn't seen a car like that before in the 50th sector. It looked suspicious. The young man decided that he needed to look into it. At the same time, he went to 18th Street, to the entrance to the base of Hector's group. The head of the group himself came to meet the person sitting in the back seat of the black car. A luxuriously dressed young man with a pince-nez came out, holding a stick, and Hector called him a magician and very politely invited him inside. Ray was very interested in the stranger, and now he wanted to know who he was. From this man came dark blue, almost black mana, a lot of it. This flower on his chest resembled the one on the golems. The hero wanted to know what those rings were around the man's cup. There is also a lot of mana around these rings, as if the magician is using them to limit his energy. Ray concluded that this man was incredibly dangerous, and the young man decided that he had to tell Niels about it immediately. He immediately headed back to 17th Street to the entrance of their boss's base. When the hero arrived, he saw the commotion and wondered what had happened to their supplies. The young man approached one of the men and asked where to find Niels. He recognized the guy and asked him how he got to their protected facility. Ray replied that it was easy because the gate was open, and he wanted to find out where to find Niels as soon as possible. The man said that the boss had gone outside to prepare for war. He added that it was dangerous here, so let the guy get out. The hero asked me to tell Niels something. He knew that he shouldn't tell him about mana. He asked me to tell the boss of 17th Street to beware of the man with the binoculars. When Ray returned to his tent, the children were already sound asleep, and he and Pale sat outside, the head of the dungeon children confident that the war would not last long. The hero asked if his friend thought the war would end in just a week. Pale didn't answer. He asked who Ray thought would win, and the guy said he didn't know because the two groups were practically equal in strength. He thought that Niels should win for the sake of the children's safety. If Hector wins this war, everyone will be in trouble. All the children of 17th Street will be sold into slavery at once. For a moment, the friends were silent. Then suddenly, Pale heard something. He said, "I think it's already started." Both boys stared intently into the darkness, trying to hear something else. The next second, their guesses were confirmed, and Pale asked if Ray had heard it too. The hero admitted to himself that he had never heard anything like this before, and he thought something was wrong. At that time, on 17th Street, Niels's men were trying to hold back the enemy attack. The two young men fired whole clips at the enemy, but it did not help. The golem was not afraid of firearms. After the attack, it did not have a single scratch. The next moment, the monster held out his hand, which showed the dark blue mana of a magician. The golem pointed this magical weapon directly at the young men from Niels's brigade. This attack could only be compared to an explosion, and both men ended up on the ground. One of them could not believe that this was really happening. The golem's eyes glowed with blue magical light, and it came too close. The monster's hand was rapidly approaching the frightened man's head. Unfortunately, he could not be saved, and blood splashes sprinkled everything around him. A magician wearing a binocular watched the golem's actions, and he told the young man who accompanied him that it smelled like dung. The monster approached his master and received praise. The sorcerer ordered his creature to cleanse everything around him. Ray noticed that the sound they heard was getting louder. Pale tried to stop his friend. He grabbed him by the arm and asked where he was going. The hero replied that today was not the usual day. He wanted to find out something, and the head of the dungeon children asked for permission to go with him. But Ray forbade him to do so. He asked Pale to wait for his return here. Their loud argument woke up one of the boys, who came out of the tent and asked why the brothers were awake. Pale patted the boy's head and apologized for waking him up, promised to be back soon, and asked him to go back to sleep. When the child returned to the tent, Ray turned to his friend. Before he could say anything, the head of the dungeon children agreed to stay with the kids. The young man understood that they should not be left alone, but this did not make him less concerned about Ray. He asked him not to go too far and to come back as soon as he found out what was happening there. The hero promised to come back soon, but later he got to the scene and froze in his tracks, with a fire raging around him and the bodies of the dead lying on the ground. Ray did not look at his feet and stepped into a red puddle. Suddenly, the young man came across the appointed man from Niels's team, who was still alive. The hero asked him what happened here, and he recognized the guy. He said that those bastards brought a golem with them. The monster was controlled by a man with binoculars, whom Ray had warned about today. The wounded man's eyes were closing. He could barely speak, and his last words were that they could not resist. The last breath, and the soldier of the 17th Street Brigade fell silent forever. Ray was silent. He didn't feel any emotions, but he realized that things were bad. This man died protecting the children of these streets. The hero stretched out his hand and closed his eyes. Raindrops fell on the calm face of the murdered man. Ray looked down at the ground and saw a knife under his feet, so he decided to pick it up. After looking around the street, the hero realized that at this rate, Niels's brigade was losing. The hero decided that it was in his best interest to help the boss of 17th Street. At that time, the bridge under which the children's dungeon hideout was located was in terrible danger. Ray could not have predicted that this would happen, but his absence cost someone's life. Some of the kids didn't even have time to wake up, it happened so fast. Pale clutched the little one in his arms, trying to protect him, and he looked into the face of danger, realizing that death was unavoidable. The golem pointed a hand with almost black mana directly at the defenseless children. The next moment there was an energy shot. Pale had time to mentally ask Ray to never come back here. Meanwhile, the hero continued to look around the center of 17th Street. He realized that he was late. Every second he came across the bodies of Niels's men, and the brigade was defeated. The only thing that inspired at least some optimism was the fact that Ray had not found his boss, and he could only hope that he was still alive. Suddenly, the hero froze in place. He felt an explosion behind him from the direction where he had left the children. He looked around and immediately realized that the worst had happened. He broke down on the spot, rushing in the direction of his tent. Ray saw the golem from a distance near their temporary shelter. The young man's breath caught in his throat as he realized what had happened. The monster was standing with its back to him, and instead of their tent, a black hole was visible. Everything around was red. The golem perfectly fulfilled the order of its owner. Although Ray could not feel emotions, he understood what had happened while he was away. The hero's mana became fiery. He no longer controlled himself. Armed only with a dagger, he rushed at the stout golem. The magical monster sensed the danger and managed to intercept Ray. A bare hand clutched the guy's body, and blood spurted from his mouth. The monster swung and threw the hero against the wall. The young man gathered his strength into a fist and managed to sit up, with only one thought in his head. He needed to make sure that the children were okay, because he had to be on time. He closed it and heard Josephine's voice calling his name cheerfully. Most likely, the hero lost consciousness. He was delirious, so he saw this place without destruction and red marks. Cheerful, smiling children ran to meet the hero. They called Brother Ray over to them, wanted to show him something. The girls of their company were also happy to see him. They were surprised that the hero had returned so soon. The young man silently looked at everything around him and tried to understand what was a dream and what was reality. Suddenly, Ray saw Pale. The leader of the dungeon children said he didn't want the hero to come back. Suddenly, the picture changed, and instead of smiling faces of his friends, he saw something horrible. They were lying motionless on the floor of the tent, covered with red spots. And in front, right before the exit, there was a bloody Pale, clutching Josephine to his chest. Corden and Miles died immediately, before they could even wake up. The hero could not believe his own eyes. Could it really have happened? He held out his hand as if hoping to wake the children. The reality was too horrifying, and Ray believed that he had not yet had time to repay them for everything his friends had done for him. The soulless golem watched as its victim stretched out his hands to the dead child. Suddenly, Ray caught himself thinking that he was constantly hearing a strange sound that was also heard on the battlefield. Now, in the face of danger, he realized that all those people on 17th Street had also been destroyed by the golem. Children died at the hands of this monster. He killed the people of Nilsa and the civilians in the area without mercy. At that moment, the hero vowed to himself that he would definitely take revenge for them. Ray managed to think about it in a split second, before the golem managed to hit him with its mana. The young man told himself that he had to find the strength to move forward. It was at this moment that something incredible happened. The car flew over the hero's head and crashed into the monster. The hero did not expect this turn of events, as he was used to relying on himself. He watched as the golem lost its balance and fell to the ground. The car stopped, but the driver was not yet visible. Finally, the door opened, and it was Niels himself, saving Ray's life for the second time in the last few days. He rushed to the guy because he realized that he could not get to his feet on his own. Niels quickly examined Ray and realized that the boy's bones were intact. The hero tried to say something, but could only get one word out: children. The man looked in the direction where the children's tent had been until recently. Anger overwhelmed Niels, and he clenched his fists, trying to calm the unbearable pain. The boss of 17th Street told Ray that he was sorry. The man believed he was to blame for what happened. He was late. The hero disagreed because he believed that it was he who had not saved the children. The usually calm Niels was overcome with emotion. The man did not hold back. He went over and hugged the boy who had just suffered a terrible loss. After calming down a bit, Ray asked his boss what happened to his subordinates, and he replied that they were all dead. Niels could not have imagined that the dastardly Hector would call on sorcerers from other sectors to help him. The young man asked what the man planned to do next. The boss planned to return to 17th Street and look for survivors. As soon as Niels finished his sentence, a powerful blue mana cut into his chest. Such a sight could have puzzled anyone, let alone a teenager. It was the golem again, revenging himself on Niels for his fall and making a big hole inside the 17th Street boss. The creature's eyes were burning with red fire. It was controlled by magic. Ray saw the life leaving Niels's eyes, and there was nothing he could do. Red liquid from the body of his rescuer flew at the hero. The boss tried to say something, but he was exhausted. The next moment, he lost the ability to stand and fell on top of Ray. The hero hugged his older comrade's back, and his hand fell into the void. There should be a man's heart there, but she destroyed it with a golem. Ray's memory immediately recalled their training together. The young man recalled how much fun it was to have lunch together after the grueling exercise. Every time they met, Niels would put his hand on Ray's head and smile. The heart of the missing hero was truly fiery. The heart of a strong man who never forgot about the weak. Now no one can save Ray from another golem attack. But the death of Niels awakened something in the young man's body, and he promised to take revenge on all those responsible for today's tragedy. Black rain, blood, and sweat. This is the formula for this terrible night. The hero was still lying pressed down by the body of his dead friend. He called him by name, but it was all in vain. Niels was dead. Ray's mind flashed to the idea that if this was a bad dream, let it end as soon as possible. But it was a terrible, bizarre reality, where the young man was always threatened by a ruthless golem. The hero didn't realize what he was doing. He held out his bloody hand. His crimson mana met the blue energy that controlled the monster. The golem was controlled by a monocle-wearing magician. This creature had no mind of its own. It only obediently followed instructions. But Ray couldn't control his thirst for revenge now. It seemed to be tearing him apart from the inside. Where two powerful energies met, a powerful confrontation ensued. The hero's mana has changed, and in this short period of time, it has become more aggressive. Ray spoke like a mantra. He is different from a golem. He is a human being with emotions. Hugging the body of his dead friend, the hero sent such a powerful wave at the monster that he was not capable of before. His mana, like hot lava, consumed and melted the golem's body. Revenge gave him strength, and Ray was able to destroy Hector's main weapon. A molten trace of the young man's hot energy remained on the asphalt. The hero still didn't believe that Niels was dead, so he tried to wake him up. Ray didn't want to believe that he had lost all his friends on that terrible night. He told his boss on 17th Street that he shouldn't die. But suddenly, something beyond comprehension happened. Niels opened his eyes and asked the guy to stop shaking him. The man said he was sure he would not die a peaceful death, but he was not going to die today. He thought that he had no regrets, because he had managed to do a lot for someone who had started out as a miserable beggar. I wonder if he had started trying earlier, if things would have turned out differently. Niels told Ray that he started working on himself around his age. The boy asked his friend to wait. He would bring the medicine from his car, but the latter grabbed the teenager by the arm. The boss of 17th Street asked the kid to leave the place with a smile, and now there's nothing to keep him here. Ray should strive for a better life. He deserves it. Niels always considered him a little brother and took care of him as best he could. He tells the boy to paddle upstream and be careful on the rapids. The man believes in the talented Ray. He is sure that he will overcome all obstacles on the way to a happy future. After making one last effort over his frail body, Niels put this into the boy's hand. In the hero's palm, there was a key and a piece of paper. The eyes of the 17th Street boss closed forever, and Ray was left all alone. This night was too much for the teenager's psyche. Rage and despair were the first emotions the hero experienced in his life. When the morning came, the hero was still sitting under the bridge, unable to leave the place. He tried to organize his thoughts, but it was all in vain. The shock was too much. Ray moved his arms. Everything hurt. Every movement was difficult. The young man looked at his hands, which seemed to be numb, as if he had slept for a long time, so the teenager's nervous system was trying to cope with the shock. The mere memory of what happened last night awakens all of the hero's emotions at once. They helped him to overcome the golem, but now there is no need to go through it again. Ray has taken revenge on the monster that destroyed all his friends in one night. But that's not all. The people who are no less guilty of these horrors continue to live. The hero tried to concentrate on his own emotions. He realized something was wrong. Today, he will easily be able to ignite the flame in his own hand. The stronger the guy's rage, the more flames he can ignite, which means that the power of his emotions interacts with the power of magic. But the mana is still not constant. As soon as Ray is distracted, the fire disappears. The young man put his hand on his face, saying he needed to calm down and everything would work out. The hero opened his eyes and looked at his own hand. Last night he lost friends but gained emotions. Having done what he could for his fallen friends, he realized that it was time for him to do the same. Before leaving this terrible place, he must avenge all those who died that night. Ray was determined to fulfill his promise to himself. The hero quickly reached the main square of 17th Street, where Hector's men were already in charge. The store owner, an acquaintance of the boys, told his friend that because of the victory of Hector's group, everything would be more difficult now. The boss of 18th Street, now 17th Street, was standing by his car talking to his henchmen, and he did not feel threatened. In the conversation, he mentioned Niels, who could have survived if he had agreed to fulfill the terms of their negotiations. It was at this moment that Ray's eyes turned red, and a powerful mana enveloped the Avenger's entire body and focused on his weapon. The hero was about to attack Hector when a heavy palm fell on his shoulder. The young man had no time to talk, so he turned and attacked the intruder. Turning around, Ray immediately recognized the man. It was Hector's right-hand man, Humphrey, whom they had met at the warehouse. The man had an excellent reaction and managed to jump away in time without suffering significant injuries. Humphrey shouted, ordering the teenager to stop. But Ray was consumed with a thirst for revenge. The young man was convinced that Hector's entire group was going to die. Swinging his trophy dagger, he attacked Gumpry again and again. His movements were quick and precise. The man also recognized the teenager, but he could not understand how he did it. This boy wasn't that strong before, but he was able to improve his skills in a few days. For the first time, Humphrey was afraid that he might lose to the child. Ray was not going to wait any longer. He swiftly attacked the enemy, stabbing him in the shoulder. Despite all his skill, the young man realized too late that his shoulder had been set up on purpose. Thus, Gumption was able to grab the boy. He told the hero that he should not choose to die for something as stupid as revenge. Judging by the man's strange behavior, he did not intend to attack the young man. Calling Ray the ghost of 17th Street, Humphrey said he had a proposition for him. The man admitted that he had been following the young man for a long time, and he wanted Ray to listen to him. The guy didn't say a word, but he didn't run away either. He looked at Gumption with expectation. There were also rumors that he was called a silent man because he silently and efficiently performed his duties. Ray thought that the gambler now had such a desperate look on his face, as if he wasn't going to cheat. The hero asked what Gumpry was going to offer him. The man said he wanted Ray to leave Sector 50 as soon as possible, and the young man wanted to know why he should do so. The next moment, Hector's right-hand man said something incredible. He asked the boy to find his younger brother. Hector sold the boy to the City of Magicians, and he needs to be rescued. The boss promised to tell us about his whereabouts if Humphrey worked for him for 10 years, and he's still in this team because of that. Now his brother should be about Ray's age. The hero asked why he should accept the offer. Humphrey answered because the young man knew how to use magic. After their fight in the warehouse, he has no doubt about it. But now, even with his magic, Ray won't be able to overcome Hector. After all, there is always a strong magician next to the boss of 18th Street. The hero saw Gumpry's blue-black mana, which meant that the man was very afraid. He said that Hector was being guarded by an unusual magician, a demon. Anyone who disagrees with something immediately freezes. Once a sorcerer even drowned a boy by placing his head in a bubble of water. He is an incredibly cruel and powerful mage, and it will be difficult to defeat him. Gumpry believed that Ray should leave this place for a while. He had to survive and become stronger to be able to take revenge, and the hero agreed with the man's words. The young man had never studied magic and simply relied on his own intuition, while his opponent was an expert, so there was no chance of winning. Humphrey has heard that the City of Wizards is located upstream of the Elton River, a place only a wizard can get to. The man handed Ray a bag with money in it, which he had been saving all his life, and a piece of paper with his brother's name and description. The hero was surprised to find out why Gumption trusted him with such a sum, since he might not be able to keep his promise. Hector's right-hand man replied that he knew the boy, and that he was not someone who would break his own words. In addition, having seen Ray in action, he is sure that he will be able to reach the higher sectors. He believes in him. These words of Gumpry reminded the boy of Niels's last wish. The hero realized that the man was counting on his help. Ray was in no hurry to answer, even though he had already made a decision. Humphrey could not stand the tension and shouted, "The other members of the group would be here soon. The guy should decide soon." The hero replied that he had one condition. The man has to promise that he will take care of the bodies of his dead friends who remained under the bridge. Only then will he find his brother. Humphrey agreed to this condition without hesitation, and he will definitely do everything. Ray took the money and left, telling the man to wait for him. After taking a few steps, the young man broke into a run, moving to meet the sun, upstream, away from Sector 50. Humphrey watched Ray go, believing in his heart that the boy would return with his brother. When he reached the intersection of 16, 17, 18, and 19 streets, the hero stopped. He needs to catch his breath and check for a tail, and extra eyes are not needed now. Looking back, the young man saw an old acquaintance and decided to approach her. It was the blind storyteller Viola, a woman who could not see him but had excellent hearing. The hero threw a coin into a tin can at the old woman's feet. He wanted to ask her something. Sometimes not enough, so Viola must answer quickly. The woman recognized Ray's voice and asked what he wanted to know. The young man asked if the story about the rainbow that the storyteller told the children was not a fiction. Is it true that if you find the end of the rainbow, you can make a wish and it will come true? At that moment, the hero remembered how he first heard about the rainbow from little Josephine. Ray asked the kid what a rainbow was, and he explained that it was a long, colorful ribbon that appeared in the clouds after it rained. The child compared the rainbow to a brightly colored donut from which a piece was bitten off, and if you find the end of the rainbow, you can make a wish. The hero then got distracted from the story. He thought that these were fairy tales for kids, which made Josephine very angry. He was thinking about something of his own, and he didn't believe the story at all, and the kid called him a fool. Only now, left alone with his own grief, did Ray realize that this fairy tale could be true. Viola answered that the rainbow does exist, but whether or not to make a wish is a personal matter. The hero looked at the woman's chest, where her mana was hiding in the cup. The energy was pure and calm as always. The same purple color, Ray couldn't tell if Viola was lying or telling the truth. The young man recalled Hampre's words that a sorcerer had once looked for a rainbow here. The hero's fists are clenched, so the magician in the pince-nez is hunting for the rainbow, which means he has clear evidence of its existence. Ray asked the blind woman if he could find a rainbow. Would she be able to resurrect the dead? The woman smiled and answered ambiguously, "Who knows? They say that you can make a wish, and any wish will come true thanks to the magic of the rainbow. You just have to believe in it." These words of the storyteller encouraged Ray, and he decided that he had a chance to fix everything. Suddenly, Viola added, "No one knows where the rainbows are hiding. Probably their home is somewhere far away." The hero was a little upset, but sincerely thanked the woman for this information. As he was about to disappear, he advised the old storyteller to leave. The young man treated the old woman well and did not want her to suffer from Hector's gang. Some time passed and the hero reached the outskirts of the 50th sector, 23rd Street. Ray sat down to rest for a while, and he remembered that he had a piece of paper in his pocket that the dying Niels had left him. He ended up there, in the place his friend had indicated. The young man found a white car here, a greeting and last resort from the boss of 17th Street. Ray recalled their conversation when Niels promised to leave him a car to make it easier to leave Sector 50. The hero went to the car and the man also left him the keys. As soon as Ray took hold of the door handle, he heard someone ask him who he was behind him. A man in the uniform of Hector's henchman mistook the boy for Niels's henchman. He asked if the young man had received an order to bring the car. The guard was holding a syringe in his hand. His right arm was tied with a tourniquet. When the strange man received no response, he asked where Niels himself was. Ray thought that none of Hector's men were following him, and he shouldn't waste his precious time. Continuing to be silent, the hero pulled the door handle. The man was irritated by the boy's behavior, and he shouted out where he was going. He jumped up and ran to the car, but Ray was faster. He had already jumped into the car. After getting behind the wheel, the hero was about to slam the door. When the gap was very small, Hector's bodyguard managed to grab the door. He tried to pull Ray out of the car, and their confrontation continued for a moment. The furious henchman demanded that the young man open the door. The hero thought that last night he used too much mana. His empowering magic was over. We need to quickly concentrate our last strength and get rid of this obstacle to freedom. Ray's powerful red energy, like a laser weapon, hit the man right in the face. He lost his balance and flew to the ground, and now he could close the car door without any problems. The hero put his right hand on the gear lever. His foot went down on the gas pedal, and a new life awaited Ray. The car took off, leaving behind the body of Hector's bodyguard and the 50th sector. The young man was confidently holding the wheel. His way was to the city of magicians. The guy still could not believe that he would soon get out of this horrible place. 23rd Street was quickly left behind, and he was rapidly approaching the outskirts, with the unknown ahead. Outside of Sector 50, the scenery was no better, with devastation everywhere. A raven was sitting on a pile of garbage, watching the white car closely. Having driven a safe distance from the outskirts of his hometown, the hero stopped and decided to look in the trunk. Ray was surprised by what he saw. There was a lot of everything he needed for his trip. The young man thought that Niels had prepared well. Even after his death, he had taken care of him. The hero decided that it would take a few more days to reach the next sector. It's time to stop and rest for a bit as soon as he reaches the next town, as much as possible, to find out about the magic. Looking at the fire, Ray tried to structure the knowledge he had now. During his short life, he concluded that there are two main types of mana. The red one can be used without prior preparation. To get a different energy, you need to mix colors. Manipulating mana is quite difficult, but if Ray feels certain emotions, some types of energy are attracted faster. After surviving the night before, the young man concluded that rage is a very strong feeling. If you recall some events in your life that will awaken this feeling, the red mana will be activated faster. The hero tried this technique, but it didn't work out well. He concluded that for now, this is the maximum, because as soon as he loses concentration on the emotion, the mana disappears. Now it's time to try combinations of emotions. Mixing colors will give you a different type of energy. It was an interesting activity that completely absorbed the hero's attention. Trying to mix different types of mana, the young man made an interesting discovery. He looked at his hands, and the magic suddenly disappeared. Ray thought that mana types that can't mix destroy each other. Combining colors takes a lot of effort, and it requires a lot of moral strength. Ray realized that there are combinations that should work well, and that's what you should focus on. He didn't do it before because he didn't see the need, but now everything has changed. The hero's eyes reflected not an ordinary night sky. It was like the northern lights, and Ray admired it and thought that he had to improve his own skills faster now. Soon after, he continued on to the next sector. Throughout the day, the young man would stop to rest and have a snack. During each of his stops, Ray continued to combine different colors of mana. The young man learned how to create natural phenomena with the help of magic and was the first to make it snow. Then, using blue mana, the hero created a storm, and the dark blue energy helped to form hailstones. Ray was exhausted enough that night to call it a night. Stretched out on the roof of the car, he wondered if he could use magic more smoothly. If he could keep the mana in his heart and use it when necessary, the whole process would be more efficient. He remembered the rings he had seen around the magician's mana cup. The young man decided that he would look for such a way when he found himself in Sector 49. Meanwhile, on 17th Street, Sector 50, under the bridge, Hector's men were searching the area. They had been searching for hours, but it was all in vain. A magician with a binocular was sitting in a black car, and he asked Hector if they had found anything yet. One of the henchmen apologized and said that they would definitely find the golem, they just needed a little more time. The sorcerer ordered the boy to take his stick. The young man began to apologize and begged for more time. The golem would definitely find them. The sorcerer said angrily that he did not like people who did not understand him. The guard realized that the order would not end well for him, and he trembled with horror. But he didn't dare to obey the sorcerer, so he stretched out his hand and touched the stick. Suddenly, everything around him turned blue, and the man screamed in terror or pain. The next moment, the guard's hand turned into a piece of ice. A second later, the whole man turned back to the ice statue. This demonstration did not end the magician's anger. He pushed the man with his stick. The ice guard flew to the ground and broke into pieces. There were true rumors about the sorcerer. He was really ruthless. The magician believed that everyone around him had to obey his orders immediately and without arguing. He got out of the car and went to his place, where a trace remained on the asphalt after Ray's powerful attack. The man handed the sorcerer a piece and said it looked like a part of a golem. The sorcerer saw the remnants of mana in the air, and he immediately realized that magic had been used here, and that it had left a trace. He took a few steps forward and saw that a little further on, the residual concentration of magic was even greater. The mage sat down and touched the ground with his hand. Now he finally realized that the golem was destroyed. The man asked the guard who lived here, and he replied, "A bunch of street kids." This news stunned the sorcerer. He wondered if his golem had been destroyed by vagrants, and his assistant replied that the children must have left when the war began. The magician could not believe that an ordinary tramp could use magic, but the next moment a thought made him very happy. The sorcerer couldn't help but laugh out loud, and his behavior stunned the guard. He wondered if a homeless child from these streets could seriously use magic, if he had found a small combination of elemental mana on his own among the many variants of this world. Eventually, the magician decided that it was simply impossible. Another sorcerer must have come here and destroyed the golem, and he ordered to find out what really happened. The man with the monocle did not believe that an ordinary child from the street could have done it. But if he is wrong, and this is still possible, then he may be a genius whose destiny is to become the most powerful Archmage of this world. Finally, the day came when Ray reached the 49th sector. When he stood by the high fence, he remembered Niels's words. Sector 49 is like the hole they live in. It's a complete mess. The only difference between them is that it's bigger than 50, with taller buildings and more streets. All the lower sectors are similar to each other, but the higher up the river you go, the more noticeable the changes are. The hero mentally agreed with the words of his fallen friend. Sector 49 is really huge. Ray was a little confused because he had never been outside the 50th sector before. Everything around him seemed strange and unfamiliar. The first difference was that there were no golems here, as if they could only be found in Sector 50. The streets looked much neater than at home, with people walking everywhere. The hero saw a sign. He read it, 36th Street, which means that there are twice as many of them here as in Sector 50. Ray's main goal was to find information about magic and that wizard with the binoculars and his rings around the cup as quickly as possible. This will help the boy to improve his skills and become stronger in order to avenge his friends. His information about the colors of mana and the city of sorcerers is also interesting, and it would be nice to get some more money. For the time being, the hero has the money that Gumption gave him, but he doesn't know how long it will take to get there. Suddenly, the young man stopped, his attention drawn to an establishment. The neat sign said that it was Veronica's bookstore.
Pet the cat.